your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Foundations of Sand. Russell Crane stood at the edge of the property he'd built with his own hands, watching the sunset paint the lake with amber light. At 42, he had achieved what most would consider the American dream. The lakeside estate outside Portland represented 15 years of calculated risks and relentless work. Russell hadn't been born into wealth. The son of a carpenter and a nurse, he'd grown up in a modest neighborhood in western Michigan, where he'd learned two crucial lessons. Nothing comes without sacrifice, and trust must be earned through blood and sweat. He put himself through college working construction, built a small contracting business, then methodically expanded into real estate development. Now he owned Crane Properties, a boutique firm specializing in luxury waterfront developments. His phone rang. It was Howard Blackwell, his attorney, and the closest thing Russell had to a friend. "The Harborview project just got final approval," Howard said. "You're going to make a fortune." "Good. I'll be in tomorrow to review the contracts," Russell replied. As he ended the call, he heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Valerie was home. His wife of 16 years had become increasingly distant over the past year, but Russell had attributed it to the stresses of her interior design business and their son's teenage rebellion. Tyler, now 15, had transformed from a respectful, athletic boy into a sullen stranger who seemed to resent everything Russell represented. Russell watched as Valerie stepped out of her BMW, her wheat blonde hair caught in the breeze. Even after all these years, she was striking, tall and elegant with a dancer's posture. He'd met her when she was designing the model home for his first major development. She'd been 24, ambitious, with an eye for luxury that matched his own vision. Russell had pursued her with the same methodical determination he applied to business deals. "You're home early," Valerie commented, surprise evident in her voice as she approached. The Harborview approvals came through. He studied her face, noting how she avoided his gaze. "Thought we might celebrate tonight." "Oh." She adjusted the strap of her purse. "I actually made plans with Diane. Design consultation for her summer home." Russell nodded, watching her carefully. "How about tomorrow night? I can make reservations at Raven and Rose." "Sure." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "That sounds nice." As they walked toward the house, Russell noticed her phone light up with a text. She quickly turned it over. Inside, Tyler sat at the kitchen island, earbuds in, focused on his laptop. "Hey, son," Russell said. Tyler barely grunted in acknowledgement. Russell had tried everything to connect with his son over the past year. Fishing trips, tickets to Trail Blazers games, even offering to teach him about real estate. Tyler had rejected every overture, preferring the company of his mother and his new friends, particularly Colton Mercer, the son of Dean Mercer, Valerie's business partner. That evening, Russell sat alone in his study, ostensibly reviewing project documents but actually examining the growing distance in his family. Something wasn't right. The foundation he'd built his life upon was shifting under his feet. Russell Crane didn't achieve success by ignoring warning signs. He opened his desk drawer and removed a small notebook where he'd been documenting patterns: Valerie's late nights, unexplained expenses, hushed phone calls. It was time to verify his suspicions. Russell didn't believe in blind trust, not even with family. Especially not with family. Chapter 2. Veils Lifted. Russell didn't consider himself a suspicious man by nature, merely pragmatic. When something wasn't adding up, he investigated. This methodical approach had saved him from numerous bad business deals. Now, he applied the same technique to his marriage. Early Monday morning, he contacted Lawrence Schultz, a private investigator he'd previously hired for business background checks. Russell laid out his concerns clinically, without emotion. "I need surveillance on my wife. Complete digital and physical monitoring. I want to know everywhere she goes, everyone she speaks with. Particular attention to Dean Mercer." "Your wife's business partner?" Lawrence asked, gray eyebrows raised slightly. "That's right. They opened that design studio 3 years ago." Russell's jaw tightened. "I've noticed certain inconsistencies. I want proof, one way or another." While waiting for Lawrence's findings, Russell maintained his normal routine. He attended meetings, closed deals, and continued his solitary evening workouts in the home gym. Valerie was increasingly absent, citing client consultations and industry events. For days later, Lawrence called. "We need to meet. Not your office. Not your home." They convened at a secluded table in a private club downtown where Russell held membership. Lawrence placed a manila envelope on the table. "It's what you suspected," he said quietly. "Your wife and Mercer have been involved for at least 8 months, based on the evidence we found." Russell didn't flinch as Lawrence outlined the details. Hotel meetings disguised as client consultations, intimate dinners in neighboring towns, explicit text messages. The digital trail was comprehensive. Russell had expected this, but something else caught his attention. "There's more," Lawrence continued, hesitation evident in his voice. "They've been diverting funds from your joint accounts. Small amounts, but it adds up. They've opened a separate account under a shell company. And they've been talking to Tyler." Russell's eyes narrowed. "My son." Lawrence nodded gravely. "Phone records show frequent calls between Tyler and both Valerie and Mercer. We intercepted several messages. They've been turning him against you, Russell." Methodically, Russell opened the envelope and examined the photographs, bank statements, and transcripts of conversations. One message from Valerie to Dean stood out. "Once her is out of the picture, everything falls into place. T is on board now." After Lawrence departed, Russell remained at the table, sipping bourbon as he processed this information. The betrayal was more calculated than he'd imagined. Not just an affair, but a conspiracy involving his own son. They'd been systematically dismantling everything he'd built. That night, Russell returned home later than usual. Tyler was in his room, and Valerie was reading in bed. She barely looked up when he entered. "How was your day?" he asked casually. "Fine. Just the usual client meetings." She turned a page in her book. "And Dean, how's the business partnership going?" If she noticed the slight emphasis on partnership, she didn't show it. "Good. We're bidding on the Lakewood Heights project." Russell nodded, changing into his night clothes. I was thinking we should take a family vacation. The 3 of us. Maybe to that island resort in the Bahamas you always wanted to visit." Valerie finally looked at him, surprise evident in her expression. "Really? You've always been too busy for extended vacations." "I think it's time to prioritize family," he replied, watching her face carefully. "Life's too short for regrets." She smiled, a genuine smile for once. "I'd like that. I'll talk to Tyler tomorrow." Russell smiled back, already calculating his next move. The chess pieces were in position. Now he needed to understand the full scope of their betrayal before executing his response. Chapter 3: The Reckoning. For 2 weeks, Russell maintained a facade of normalcy while methodically gathering evidence and formulating his strategy. The family vacation idea had worked perfectly. Valerie and Dean were accelerating their plans, believing Russell was oblivious to their betrayal. Lawrence's surveillance team had documented everything. Valerie and Dean meeting with Russell's competitors, discussing proprietary information about Crane Properties' upcoming projects. Tyler accompanying them to view apartments in Seattle, far from Portland and Russell's influence. Substantial transfers from joint accounts to their hidden fund. Most disturbing was a recorded conversation between Dean and Tyler at Dean's lake house. "Once your dad's out of the picture, I'll be there for you and your mom. We'll be a real family, the kind you deserve." Russell's son had replied, "I know. Mom says he never really loved us anyway. Just saw us as possessions." Each revelation should have wounded Russell, but instead, they reinforced his resolve. He'd grown up with nothing, fought for everything he had. He wouldn't allow their betrayal to destroy what he'd built. On a Friday evening, Russell informed Valerie he'd be working late. Instead, he sat in his car near Dean Mercer's condominium, watching as Valerie's BMW pulled into the parking garage. An hour later, Tyler arrived by Uber. A family meeting without the family patriarch. Russell drove home and accessed the safe hidden in his wine cellar. Inside were insurance policies, property deeds, and a flash drive containing contingency plans for every aspect of his life. Russell had never believed in leaving things to chance. At precisely 9 p.m., he called Howard Blackwell. "It's happening," Russell said simply. "Activate Protocol 3. "Howard, who had helped Russell structure his assets years ago as a precaution against business disputes, understood immediately. All of it. All of it. Transfer everything to the Granite Holdings structure. Effective immediately. Consider done. The alternate banking arrangements are already in place. Anything else? Russell paused, looking at the framed family photo on his desk. A smiling trio on a ski vacation 3 years earlier. Have security ready at all properties by tomorrow morning. Change all access codes. And Howard, thank you. The next day, Russell spent the morning finalizing preparations at his office downtown. When he arrived home in the afternoon, both Valerie's and Tyler's vehicles were in the driveway. Perfect timing. As Russell entered the house, Valerie was descending the stairs, looking startled to see him. Tyler stood in the living room doorway, his expression a mixture of defiance and apprehension. "Russell, I didn't expect you home so early," Valerie said, a forced smile on her face. "I imagine not," Russell replied calmly. "Is there something you want to tell me, Valerie? Perhaps about your plans with Dean? Or the apartment in Seattle?" The color drained from her face. "I don't know what you're—" "Stop lying," Russell interrupted, his voice steel-edged but controlled. "I know everything. The affair, the diverted funds, turning my own son against me." Tyler stepped forward. "She didn't turn me against you. You did that yourself, always choosing work over family." Russell regarded his son coldly. "Is that what they told you? Then I never cared? While they planned to steal what I've spent my life building." Valerie's demeanor suddenly changed. Her shoulders straightened and her eyes hardened. "It doesn't matter now. We're done pretending. Russell." She walked to the door and opened it. Standing outside was Dean Mercer, who entered with the confidence of a man who believed he'd already won. "Russell," Dean acknowledged with a nod. "This isn't how we wanted things to go. My wife stopped me at the door." Her face was cold as she said, "I don't have a husband. You're not the father of your kid. Please leave." Russell recited the words without emotion. Behind her, my son stood smiling, already wearing the keys to my room on his keychain. Valerie's eyes widened with shock at his specific knowledge of their conversation from the previous night. "I didn't argue," Russell continued. "I just smiled, pulled out my phone, and called the bank." The confused expressions on their faces turned to alarm as Russell removed his cell phone and made a call. "Now," he said simply, then ended the call. Almost immediately, their phones began buzzing with alerts. Valerie frantically checked hers, her face paling. "What did you do?" she whispered. "Now they're the ones begging." Russell finished, pocketing his phone. "You wanted me gone? Wish granted. But you should have been more careful about what you wished for." Chapter 4. The Architect of Ruin. The morning after the confrontation, Russell sat in Howard Blackwell's office, calmly sipping coffee as his attorney updated him on the implementation of Protocol 3. All assets have been transferred to Granite Holdings, Howard confirmed. The timing was impeccable. When Valerie tried accessing the accounts this morning, everything was already secured. Russell nodded, satisfied. "And the properties?" "All locks changed, security codes updated. The lake house, the condo in Aspen, the house in Palm Springs, everything's locked down. Valerie's cards have been canceled. As we speak, she and Tyler are effectively homeless." Russell had prepared for this scenario years ago, long before he had any reason to suspect betrayal. It wasn't paranoia, it was insurance. Granite Holdings was a complex legal structure, based partially offshore, designed to be impenetrable to litigation. Within it resided the true ownership of all Russell's major assets. On paper, Russell Crane now had almost nothing. In reality, he controlled everything through proxies and trusts. "What about Mercer?" Russell asked. Howard grimaced. "He's already contacted his attorney. They're threatening litigation." "Let them try." Russell set down his cup. "I need a place to stay temporarily. Is the downtown loft ready?" "Fully furnished and stocked. The car service can take you there now." As Russell stood to leave, Howard hesitated. "Russell, about Tyler, he's still your son." Something cold flickered in Russell's eyes. "Is he?" He made his choice. To understand Russell's ruthlessness, one had to understand his past. Growing up in Michigan, Russell had learned harsh lessons about loyalty. His father, Abraham Crane, had built a modest construction company through decades of hard work, only to see it destroyed when his business partner and supposed best friend embezzled funds and vanished. The betrayal broke Abraham, who died of a heart attack 6 months later. 16-year-old Russell had watched his mother work double nursing shifts to keep their home. He'd sworn then that he would never be vulnerable like his father. He would never trust blindly, and he would never forgive betrayal. These formative experiences hardened Russell's approach to business and relationships. Every agreement included contingencies for worst-case scenarios. Every partnership was structured to protect his interests absolutely. Even his marriage had been governed by an ironclad prenuptial agreement that Valerie, young and in love, had signed without careful scrutiny. Now, as Russell settled into the sleek downtown loft that served as his contingency residence, he reviewed what he knew about his adversaries. Dean Mercer had his own history. The son of a wealthy family, he'd coasted through life on charm and connections. His design work was mediocre at best, but his social connections had made him valuable to Valerie's business. What Dean really wanted wasn't Valerie. It was access to Russell's wealth and status. Valerie herself had grown up in modest circumstances in California. She'd been ambitious when Russell met her, hungry for success and the finer things. For years, she'd been a true partner, her design talents complementing his development vision. But somewhere along the way, she'd grown resentful of Russell's drive and the sacrifices it required. And Tyler, Russell's jaw tightened thinking about his son. The boy had been corrupted by Valerie's resentment and Dean's false promises. Fed lies about his father while being groomed to help steal his legacy. That evening, Russell received the expected call from Valerie. "What have you done?" Her voice trembled with rage. "The cards don't work. The accounts are empty. We tried going to the Aspen house, and the codes have been changed. Did you really think I wouldn't protect myself?" Russell replied calmly. "Everything you're experiencing now is the direct result of your choices, Valerie. You can't do this. Half of everything is legally mine." "Is it?" "Check the prenuptial agreement you signed. Section 12, paragraph 4. In case of infidelity, you forfeit all claims. The joint accounts contain my business earnings that you were merely authorized to access. As for the properties, they're owned by entities you have no legal claim to." "We'll fight this," she hissed. "Dean's already talking to lawyers. By all means, waste what little money you have left on legal fees. The structures I've created would take years and millions to untangle. Do you really think Dean will stick around once he realizes there's no payday coming?" The line went silent for a moment. "What about Tyler?" she finally asked, her voice smaller. "He's your son. The son who conspired with you and your lover to take everything from me? He made his choice. Now he can live with it." Russell ended the call and turned to his laptop, opening a document titled Contingency Response, Phase 2. This wasn't merely about protection anymore. It was about consequences. Chapter 5, Dominoes of Destruction. 3 days after the confrontation, Russell sat at a corner table in an upscale restaurant with Alexis Bender, the ambitious young owner of a rival design firm to Valerie and Dean's business. "I'm confused, Russell," Alexis said, studying him over her wine glass. "You want me to specifically hire away Valerie and Dean's top designers and key clients? Isn't Valerie your wife?" Russell's expression remained impassive. "My soon-to-be ex-wife. This is strictly business, Alexis. Their firm is vulnerable. I'm offering financial backing for you to expand rapidly and absorb their market share. And in return, 20% silent partnership and first right of refusal on design work for all Crane Properties developments." Alexis smiled slowly. "You're not just trying to grow my business. You're systematically destroying theirs." Russell didn't deny it. "Do we have a deal?" Within 2 weeks, Valerie and Dean's design studio was hemorrhaging both talent and clients. Their 3 senior designers resigned simultaneously, taking major clients with them to Alexis Bender's rapidly expanding firm. Their landlord suddenly terminated their lease due to a previously unenforced clause, the building having been recently acquired by a subsidiary of Granite Holdings. Meanwhile, Russell had Howard Blackwell file for divorce on grounds of adultery, complete with comprehensive evidence packages. The filing made headlines in local business publications, further damaging Valerie and Dean's professional reputations. Valerie and Tyler had moved into Dean's condominium, but the situation was growing increasingly tense. Financial pressure was mounting. Dean's savings were depleting rapidly as he funded both living expenses and escalating legal fees in their futile battle against Russell's financial fortress. Russell monitored these developments through Lawrence's continued surveillance. He took no joy in their suffering. This wasn't about emotion. It was about justice and consequences. One evening, Russell received an unexpected visitor at his downtown loft. The security desk called up to announce that Tyler was in the lobby. Russell considered turning him away, but decided a confrontation might be informative. Send him up. When Tyler entered, Russell was struck by how much older his son looked after just 3 weeks. The boy's face was drawn, his eyes shadowed. Nice place, Tyler commented, looking around the minimalist loft. Already moved on from us, huh? What do you want, Tyler? Russell remained seated at his desk. Mom's a mess. Dean's talking about moving to Seattle. Says there's nothing left for them here. Tyler paced nervously. This has gone far enough, don't you think? Russell studied his son carefully. Far enough? You conspired with them. You were ready to take everything I built and walk away without a second thought. That's not how it was. Tyler protested. Dean said you'd be fine, that you had plenty of money hidden away. So theft is acceptable as long as the victim can afford the loss. Russell's voice remained level. Tell me something, Tyler. Those conversations where you said, I never loved you, that I only saw you as a possession. Did you actually believe that? Tyler looked away. Mom said, your mother lied. Everything I built was meant for you someday. I worked 16-hour days so you'd have opportunities one never had. I missed games and school events not because I didn't care, but because I was securing your future. For a moment, Russell saw doubt flicker across his son's face. It doesn't matter now, Tyler finally said. We need help. Real help. Mom's talking about moving in with her sister in California. We can't keep living with Dean. They're fighting all the time about money. And so the real reason for your visit emerges, Russell said coldly. You're not here to reconnect. You're here because the people who convinced you to betray me are now failing to provide what they promised. Dad, please. You made your choice, Tyler. Now you get to experience the consequences of blind trust. It's actually a valuable lesson, one I had to learn myself at about your age. Tyler's face hardened. You're a heartless bastard. No wonder Mom wanted out. As his son turned to leave, Russell called after him. When Dean abandons you both, and he will, remember who taught you that family means nothing when it becomes inconvenient. After Tyler left, Russell didn't immediately return to work. Instead, he stood at the window, looking out at the city lights, feeling a hollow ache in his chest. This wasn't how he'd imagined his family story would unfold. But weakness now would only validate their betrayal. Phase 2 was proceeding as planned, but the most decisive move was yet to come. Chapter 6, The Cold Edge of Winter. By early December, 6 weeks after the initial confrontation, the situation had developed exactly as Russell had predicted. Dean Mercer, facing financial ruin and frustrated by failed legal attempts to access Russell's assets, had broken things off with Valerie. Their design studio had closed, unable to meet operating costs after losing key clients and staff. Valerie and Tyler had moved in with her sister in Sacramento, reduced to borrowing money for basics. Tyler had enrolled in a local high school, forced to leave behind his friends and activities in Portland. Russell, meanwhile, had completely restructured his business operations. Crane Properties was thriving, with the Harborview development becoming the company's most successful project to date. Publicly, Russell presented a stoic image of a man focused on his work despite personal difficulties. Privately, he monitored his estranged family's deteriorating circumstances through Lawrence's occasional updates. Russell took no pleasure in their downfall, but he recognized it as the natural consequence of their actions. Actions had consequences. This was the fundamental principle by which he lived. On a snowy December evening, Russell was working late at his office when his private line rang. He didn't recognize the number. Russell Crane. It's me. Valerie's voice sounded strained, smaller than he remembered. Russell said nothing, waiting. "I need to talk to you," she continued. "About Tyler. He's not doing well." Define not doing well. He's depressed, barely eating, failing his classes. She paused. He needs his father. He needed a father when he was conspiring with you and Dean. Now he needs a financial provider. Russell's voice remained even. Those are different functions. For God's sake, Russell, he's 15. He made a mistake. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or failing a test. What Tyler did was a calculated betrayal based on months of deception. Russell checked his watch. "I have a meeting to prepare for, Valerie. Was there something specific you wanted?" Her breathing grew ragged on the line. "We can't live like this. My sister wants us out after the holidays. I can't find work. Tyler needs stability. And Dean? Has your lover abandoned his promises so quickly? Dean's in Seattle. He said he needs to focus on rebuilding his career." The bitterness in her voice confirmed what Russell had known would happen. "So predictable," Russell murmured. "Please, Russell. Not for me, but for Tyler. I'll have Howard contact you next week with a proposal for Tyler's support, conditional on several factors." Russell's tone was businesslike. "As for you, Valerie, I recommend accepting the divorce settlement offer already presented. It's more than fair given the circumstances, and fighting it will only drain what resources you have left." After ending the call, Russell gazed out at the snow falling on downtown Portland. The city looked peaceful, cleansed by the white blanket covering its surfaces. Soon, this chapter would be closed permanently. The following morning, Russell met with Howard to outline the terms for Tyler's support: a modest monthly allowance, tuition for a boarding school in Massachusetts, and a path to college funding, all contingent on Tyler meeting academic standards and having no contact with Dean Mercer. "This seems unusually generous given your position on Tyler's betrayal," Howard observed. "It's not generosity," Russell replied. "It's strategic. Tyler needs to understand that actions have consequences, but also that different choices lead to different outcomes. This gives him a path forward, but one that requires effort and discipline on his part." Howard nodded slowly. "And Valerie? The original offer stands. She gets enough to restart somewhere modest, nothing more. The prenuptial is ironclad." As Howard gathered his documents, he hesitated. "There's something else you should know. Dean Mercer has been making inquiries about Harborview, approaching investors, suggesting there might be structural issues based on inside information." Russell's expression darkened. "Is that so? It seems Mr. Mercer hasn't learned his lesson about consequences." That afternoon, Russell drove to a nondescript office building on the outskirts of Portland. Lorenzo Maddox, a former military intelligence officer who occasionally handled sensitive problems for Russell, was waiting in a sparse conference room. "Dean Mercer," Russell said without preamble, sliding a folder across the table. "He's attempting to damage my business by spreading false information to investors." Lorenzo reviewed the contents silently. "What are you looking for exactly?" "Everything. Financial history, personal weaknesses, pressure points. He's chosen to escalate this conflict. I want him neutralized." Russell's eyes were cold. "Not physically harmed, but removed as a threat permanently." "Understood." Lorenzo closed the folder. "Everyone has secrets, Russell. I'll find his." As December progressed, Russell implemented the support arrangement for Tyler through Howard. Valerie reluctantly accepted the divorce settlement, recognizing she had no viable alternatives. The legal process was proceeding smoothly toward final dissolution in January. Russell should have felt vindicated. Instead, as he decorated his loft's small Christmas tree alone, he found himself reflecting on holidays past. Tyler's excitement as a child, family ski trips to Aspen, even the quiet moments with Valerie before everything soured. His phone interrupted these uncharacteristic reflections. It was Lorenzo. "You're going to want to see this immediately," Lorenzo said, his voice unusually animated. "I found something about Mercer that changes everything." Chapter 7, Buried Truths. The file Lorenzo delivered contained information that even Russell, with his meticulous planning, hadn't anticipated. Dean Mercer's past held secrets far darker than financial improprieties or routine infidelity. Before moving to Portland 6 years ago, Dean had lived in Phoenix under the name Daniel Merritt. He'd been investigated for the suspicious death of his business partner's wife, a case that was never prosecuted due to lack of evidence, but remained technically open. He'd changed his name and relocated after the scandal damaged his reputation. Most significantly, Lorenzo had uncovered financial transactions suggesting Dean had been systematically embezzling from the design studio he shared with Valerie. Small amounts, cleverly concealed in vendor payments, had been flowing to a private account in Seattle for over 2 years. Russell spent hours studying the evidence. The parallels to his father's story were impossible to ignore. A trusted partner secretly stealing, planning to leave others to face the consequences. History repeating itself across generations. Even more disturbing were text messages between Dean and a woman in Seattle. Messages that proved his relationship with Valerie had been calculated from the beginning as a way to access Russell's wealth. One message from over a year ago read, "V thinks we're in love. It's almost too easy. Once we execute the plan, I'll have everything settled in Seattle for us." Russell had assumed Dean and Valerie were equal partners in betrayal. Now it appeared Valerie herself had been manipulated, a pawn in Dean's larger scheme. This revelation didn't excuse Valerie's infidelity or Tyler's disloyalty, but it cast their actions in a different light. They hadn't just betrayed Russell. They'd been deceived themselves, vulnerable to manipulation because of their resentments and insecurities. For 3 days, Russell considered this new information, weighing different approaches. Finally, he called Lorenzo again. "I need you to arrange a meeting. Neutral location. The upcoming weekend." "With Mercer?" Lorenzo asked. "No, with Valerie. Just Valerie. Don't tell her anything about what we've discovered." The meeting was arranged at a hotel restaurant in Eugene, halfway between Portland and Sacramento. When Valerie arrived, Russell was already seated at a corner table. She looked thinner, her designer clothes replaced by simpler attire, her confident posture diminished. "Thank you for coming," Russell said as she sat down. "Your message said it was important," she replied, her voice guarded. "Something about Tyler's arrangements." Russell studied her for a moment, then slid a folder across the table. "Before we discuss Tyler, you should review this. Take your time." Valerie opened the folder hesitantly. As she read, her expression transformed from confusion to disbelief to devastation. Color drained from her face. "This can't be real," she whispered, looking up at Russell with wide eyes. "Dean wouldn't." "Every document is authenticated. Every transaction verified." Russell's voice was dispassionate. "He played you, Valerie. He played us both." Tears formed in her eyes as she continued reading. When she reached the messages to the woman in Seattle, her hands began to shake. "He said he loved me, that we were building a future together." Her voice broke. "He convinced me that you never really cared about us, that you only saw us as possessions. And you believed him because it was easier than addressing the real issues in our marriage." Russell responded evenly. "You were unhappy, and he offered an easy escape." Valerie set down the documents, visibly struggling to maintain composure. "Why are you showing me this? To prove how easily I was manipulated? To make me feel even worse about what I've done?" "No, I'm showing you because you deserve to know the truth. And because what happens next depends on what you do with this information." She looked at him questioningly. "Dean Mercer destroyed my family," Russell continued, his voice now carrying an edge of steel. "He manipulated my wife, poisoned my son against me, and tried to steal what I spent my life building. Now he's in Seattle, attempting to damage my business reputation while planning his next scheme." "What are you going to do?" Valerie asked quietly. "I'm going to ensure he never harms another family." Russell leaned forward. "The question is, are you going to help me?" Valerie stared at him, conflict evident in her expression. "Why would you want my help after what I did?" "Because you're the only person who can get close enough to him without raising suspicion. Because you have as much reason to want justice as I do. And because helping me is the only way you'll ever rebuild any kind of relationship with Tyler. You're using our son as leverage? I'm offering you a path to redemption, Valerie. For both of you." Russell's expression softened slightly. "Tyler doesn't know about any of this yet. He still believes Dean cared about him. Finding out the truth from someone who loves him will be difficult enough. Valerie was silent for a long moment, staring at the damning evidence before her. Finally, she looked up, something hardening in her gaze. "What do you need me to do?" Russell outlined his plan, methodical, comprehensive, and designed to ensure Dean Mercer would face the consequences of his actions without any risk to those implementing justice. Valerie listened carefully, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When Russell finished, Valerie took a deep breath. "I'll do it. Not for us. There probably isn't an us anymore, but for Tyler. And because Dean deserves whatever's coming to him." As they parted ways, Valerie hesitated. "Russell, I'm sorry. Not just for believing Dean, but for everything before that. We were broken long before he came along." Russell nodded, neither accepting nor rejecting her apology. "Actions have consequences, Valerie. Always. But sometimes, different actions can create different outcomes. Remember that." Chapter 8. The Execution. January brought bitter cold to Seattle, where Dean Mercer was establishing his new life. He'd leased an expensive downtown condo and was courting potential clients, trading on his Portland reputation while carefully avoiding mention of his business's collapse. Dean had no idea he was already under comprehensive surveillance. Lorenzo's team monitored his every move, building a detailed profile of his daily patterns, professional contacts, and digital activities. Russell, reviewing the reports from Portland, waited for the optimal moment to implement the next phase. That moment came when Valerie contacted Dean in mid-January, her voice tearful over the phone. "I can't do this anymore, Dean. Russell's lawyers are crushing me. The settlement barely covers rent for a studio apartment. Tyler's miserable at that boarding school." She paused, allowing desperation to color her tone. "I need your help. Please." Dean hesitated, clearly reluctant to re-entangle himself with Valerie's problems. "Val, I'm just getting established here. I don't have resources to—" "I'm not asking for money," she interrupted. "I have information about Russell's business, his financial structures. Information worth a lot to the right people." This caught Dean's attention. "What kind of information?" "Not over the phone. I need to see you. I can come to Seattle this weekend." After some persuasion, Dean agreed to meet her. Russell, listening to the recorded call, nodded with satisfaction. Valerie had played her part perfectly, appealing to both Dean's greed and his ego. That weekend, Valerie arrived in Seattle, checked into the hotel Russell had arranged, and met Dean for dinner. She was wearing a wire, with Lorenzo's team monitoring from a nearby van. "You look good," Dean said, evaluating her across the table. His initial reluctance had given way to calculated charm. "Appearances can be deceiving," Valerie replied with a bitter smile. "I'm barely holding it together." Throughout dinner, she carefully built a narrative about Russell's supposedly vulnerable financial position, hinting at information she discovered while going through documents before leaving Portland. "He has a backup structure, Grana Holdings. That's where everything valuable is hidden." She leaned closer, including electronic records of every development project for the past 10 years. Plans, permits, material specifications, everything. Dean's eyes gleamed with interest. "And you have access to these records?" "I have the access credentials. Russell never changed them. He doesn't know I found them." She lowered her voice. "There are problems with Harborview, Dean. Serious structural issues they've covered up. The kind of information that could be worth millions to the right parties." "Why are you telling me this?" Dean asked, suspicion finally surfacing. "You could take this to Russell's competitors yourself." Valerie's expression hardened convincingly. "Because I don't just want money. I want Russell to suffer like I'm suffering. You know his connections. You know who would pay most for this information. I can get the files, but I need your help to monetize them." By the end of dinner, Dean was fully engaged, already planning how to approach potential buyers for the non-existent information. They agreed to meet the following afternoon at Dean's condo to review the files Valerie claimed to have downloaded. As she left the restaurant, Valerie spoke quietly into her concealed microphone. "He's in. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. Russell received the confirmation in Portland and made one final call to Lorenzo. "Proceed as planned. Everything needs to be in place by noon tomorrow." The next day, Valerie arrived at Dean's luxury condo building carrying a laptop bag. Lorenzo's team had already positioned themselves throughout the building, including a maintenance worker on Dean's floor. Dean welcomed Valerie with a kiss on the cheek, his earlier reluctance completely gone now that he sensed profit. "I've been thinking about potential buyers. I have contacts at Thompson Development who would pay generously for verified structural issues with Harborview." "Let's look at the files first," Valerie suggested, removing a laptop from her bag. "The evidence needs to be rock solid." As Dean leaned over her shoulder, eager to see the damaging information, Valerie opened a folder containing construction photos. While he was distracted, she pressed a specific key combination, activating a program Russell's IT specialist had installed. "What am I looking at here?" Dean asked, squinting at images of foundation work. "Evidence," Valerie replied, standing suddenly. "Just not the kind you were expecting." Dean looked up in confusion as his own television suddenly activated. On the screen appeared images of Dean meeting with various people in Seattle, followed by recordings of phone conversations, including calls to associates in Phoenix discussing his former identity as Daniel Merritt. "What the hell is this?" Dean demanded, face paling. "This is justice, Dean. Or should I say Daniel?" Valerie's voice was steel-edged. "We know everything. Your history in Phoenix. The embezzlement from our design studio. Your real girlfriend in Seattle." Dean lunged for the laptop, but Valerie stepped back quickly. "Don't bother. It's already done. Everything has been transmitted to multiple destinations." The television continued displaying evidence. Financial records showing Dean's systematic theft from the design studio, his communications with his Seattle girlfriend discussing how he was using Valerie, and finally, records from the Phoenix investigation into his business partner's wife's death. "You crazy bitch," Dean snarled, advancing toward Valerie threateningly. "You think Russell put you up to this?" After everything, before he could reach her, the door opened and Lorenzo entered with another man, a Seattle police detective. "Dean Mercer," the detective asked. "We have some questions about financial improprieties related to Winterstone Design Studio in Portland. We also have colleagues in Phoenix who are very interested in speaking with you regarding the reopened investigation into Patricia Lennox's death." As Dean was escorted from the condominium, Lorenzo ensured Valerie was safely on her way to the airport. The plan had executed flawlessly. By evening, Dean Mercer was in custody, facing charges in 2 states and the complete destruction of his carefully constructed false identity. Russell, receiving confirmation of the operation's success, allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction. Dean had attempted to destroy Russell's family and business using manipulation and lies. Now he would face the consequences of his own buried truths. True justice wasn't about revenge. It was about ensuring natural consequences for one's actions. Dean had sown deception and betrayal. Now he would reap their harvest. Chapter 9. Frost and Thaw. 3 months after Dean Mercer's arrest, Russell stood on the observation deck of Portland's Pittock Mansion, gazing at the city spread below him. Early spring sunshine illuminated Mount Hood in the distance, its snow-capped peak brilliant against the blue sky. Dean remained in custody, denied bail due to flight risk. The reopened investigation in Phoenix had uncovered new evidence in the death of Patricia Lennox, and prosecutors were confident in securing a conviction. His financial crimes in Portland had been fully documented, ensuring he would face justice in multiple jurisdictions. The divorce between Russell and Valerie had been finalized 6 weeks earlier. The terms remained as Russell had originally offered, enough for Valerie to start over modestly, but nothing approaching the luxury she had once enjoyed. She had accepted without protest, acknowledging it was more than fair given the circumstances. Russell's phone vibrated with a text message, "We're here." He turned to see Valerie's car, pulling into the parking area below. She emerged first, followed by Tyler, home from boarding school for spring break. This meeting had been Russell's idea, neutral ground, a casual lunch to discuss Tyler's future. It wasn't forgiveness precisely. Russell Crane still believed absolutely in consequences, but he also recognized that both Valerie and Tyler had been victims of manipulation, even if their own weaknesses had made them vulnerable to it. As they approached, Russell noted the changes in his son. Tyler stood straighter, his expression less sullen than defiant. The expensive Massachusetts boarding school was known for its discipline and academic rigor. According to reports Russell received, Tyler was performing adequately, though not exceptionally. Russell, Valerie acknowledged with a nod. She looked different, her hair shorter, her clothing simpler. She had found work at a small design firm in Sacramento, starting over at a junior level. "Dad," Tyler said, his voice caught between reluctance and something else, perhaps regret. "Thank you both for coming," Russell replied. "Shall we have lunch? The view from the restaurant here is exceptional." During lunch, conversation remained cautious, focused primarily on Tyler's school experiences and his plans for college. Russell listened more than he spoke, evaluating his son's maturity and judgment. As they finished dessert, Russell addressed the underlying tensions directly. "I didn't arrange this meeting to dwell on the past, but we can't move forward without acknowledging it." Tyler looked down at his plate, while Valerie met Russell's gaze steadily. "What happened was a failure on multiple levels," Russell continued. "Dean Mercer was the architect of much of the deception, but he exploited real problems that already existed between us. I should have seen through him," Valerie said quietly. "I wanted to believe someone could love me the way he pretended to." Tyler looked up, his expression pained. "He told me you didn't care about us, that you only cared about your business. I believed him because it felt true. You were always working, always focused on the next project." Russell nodded, accepting this perspective without defensiveness. "I built everything I did with you in mind, Tyler. The legacy was always meant for you. But I failed to make that clear, to balance the present and the future." He turned to Valerie. "And I failed to see how unhappy you'd become. That doesn't excuse your choices, but I recognize my part in creating the conditions Dean exploited." "What happens now?" Tyler asked directly. "That depends on what you both want," Russell replied. "I'm not offering reconciliation in the traditional sense. Too much has happened for that. But I'm offering a path forward." He outlined his proposal. Tyler would complete his education at the boarding school, then attend college with Russell's full financial support. Upon graduation, if Tyler demonstrated responsibility and business acumen, there would be a place for him at Crane Properties. For Valerie, Russell offered professional connections in Sacramento to help rebuild her design career and a commitment to civil co-parenting of Tyler. "This isn't forgiveness," Russell clarified, his eyes hard. "I don't forget betrayal, and I don't pretend it didn't happen. But I recognize degrees of culpability, and I believe in proportional consequences." Tyler looked at his father with new understanding. "You're still punishing us, just less severely than Dean." Russell's expression remained steady. "I'm offering consequences appropriate to actions and circumstances. Dean plotted meticulously to destroy lives for personal gain. Your actions, while damaging, were born partly from manipulation and partly from genuine grievances." "And if we reject your terms?" Valerie asked. "Then we maintain the current arrangements. The choice is yours." Russell's tone made clear this wasn't a negotiation. After lunch, as they walked through the mansion's gardens, Tyler fell into step beside his father, slightly apart from Valerie. "I'm sorry," he said suddenly, voice low. "Not just for believing Dean, but for betraying you, for being weak." Russell studied his son's profile, so similar to his own at that age. Weakness isn't permanent unless you allow it to be. The measure of a person isn't in never falling, but in how they rise afterward. "Is that what you're doing now? Rising after falling?" "No," Russell corrected. "I didn't fall. I was attacked, and I defended what's mine. There's a difference." Tyler nodded slowly. "Will you ever truly trust me again?" Russell didn't soften the truth. "Trust is earned, not given. Every action builds or damages it. You've damaged yours significantly. Rebuilding it will take years of consistent choices. But it's possible." "It's possible," Russell confirmed. "Though it will never be blind trust. That's a luxury I don't grant anyone." As they prepared to part ways, Valerie approached Russell while Tyler waited by the car. "You could have destroyed us completely," she said. "Why didn't you?" Russell looked past her to Tyler, then back to her face. "Because total destruction wasn't proportional to your actions. I believe in justice, Valerie, not vengeance. Is that what you call what happened to Dean? Justice. Absolutely. Everything that's happening to him is the direct result of his own actions finally catching up to him. Russell's expression was implacable. Just as everything happening to you and Tyler now is the consequence of yours. Valerie studied him for a moment. You really don't forgive, do you? Not completely. No, Russell acknowledged without apology. But I can move forward without forgiveness if there's sufficient reason to do so. He gestured toward their son. He's that reason. As Valerie and Tyler drove away, Russell returned to the observation deck, watching the panorama of the city he'd helped build. The cold calculation that had guided him through this ordeal had served its purpose. Justice had been served, proportional to each person's actions. Russell Crane would never again trust blindly, never fully forgive betrayal. But he would move forward, rebuilding what could be salvaged, discarding what couldn't. The foundations of his life had been tested and had held firm. Everything else could be reconstructed, stronger than before. A fortress built on the bedrock of hard-earned wisdom. Behind him, Mount Hood gleamed in the spring sunshine, its peaks still covered in winter's frost, even as the world below awakened to new growth. Like the mountain, Russell would maintain his cold, impenetrable core while allowing measured change around it. This was his nature. This was his strength. This was his justice. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.